Imagine, for a moment, a scandal so vast, so deeply woven into the highest reaches of power, that it threatens to upend the very core of a political movement, and perhaps shake the confidence of a nation. This is not simply the premise of a blockbuster thriller or a wild conspiracy. It is the stark and unsettling reality now confronting former President Donald Trump as the clamor for the full disclosure of the Jeffrey Epstein files escalates to an unprecedented crescendo. This uproar is not limited to the expected critics or distant observers. It has ignited a firestorm within Trump's own political base, setting off a chain reaction of outrage, suspicion, and existential questioning. At this pivotal moment, the central question reverberates louder than ever. What truths are concealed within the Epstein files that so many of the world's most powerful figures are desperate to keep hidden? And why has the quest for transparency grown into a battle that tests the very soul of American democracy itself? To truly understand the magnitude of this crisis, we must journey back through the tangled and often shadowy history of the Epstein saga. Jeffrey Epstein was never just another criminal. His life was a labyrinth of mystery and influence, a financier whose wealth seemed to materialize from the mists, whose business operations defied logic, and whose connections stretched across continents, industries, and social circles. In the early years of the 21st century, Epstein was first investigated for egregious sex crimes. Yet instead of facing the full and unyielding force of the law, he received a plea deal so shockingly lenient, so unprecedented in its terms, that legal scholars and journalists continue to debate its legitimacy to this very day. Many believe this deal was no accident, but rather an orchestrated shield, a sophisticated mechanism designed to protect the rich and powerful from public scrutiny and legal accountability. This shield of secrecy and privilege began to show cracks in the summer of 2019. Epstein was arrested again, this time on federal charges of sex trafficking that spanned decades and continents. The world watched, breath held, as the possibility grew that his secrets and his notorious client list might finally drag into daylight a hidden world of elite abuse, corruption, and the unchecked power of money. But just as answers seemed within reach, Epstein was discovered dead in his Manhattan jail cell. The official verdict: suicide. The circumstances so suspicious and riddled with anomalies that to this day, the majority of Americans remain unconvinced. Security cameras failed at critical moments, guards reportedly slept through their shifts, and vital evidence mysteriously disappeared. Public trust in the investigation was shattered, and conspiracy theories flourished, fueled by a sense that the truth had been deliberately silenced. The Epstein affair has haunted the collective psyche ever since. It is no longer just the sordid tale of one man's crimes, but a window into the broader systems and institutions that shield the privileged from justice. Consider the elite universities, such as Harvard, which accepted millions of dollars in donations from Epstein, contributions that now spark protests, investigations, and deep soul-searching within the academic community. Over $500 million have already been dispersed to survivors through dedicated victim compensation funds. Yet for many, justice still feels elusive. The Federal Bureau of Investigation continues to pursue international money laundering leads linked to Epstein's far-reaching network. The United Nations has issued calls for stronger, more coordinated international action against sex trafficking, recognizing the global dimensions of these crimes. The Epstein saga therefore stands as a testament to the ways in which power, secrecy, and complicity intersect to shield the few at the expense of the many. Now we reach the explosive flashpoint. Donald Trump's handling of the Epstein files has triggered a deep and potentially catastrophic crisis within his own political movement. This is not merely a hiccup or a passing controversy. It is a full-blown internal rebellion. Despite his repeated campaign promises to drain the swamp and expose the rot of elite corruption, Trump has recently shifted to a tone of dismissal. He told reporters that the case is, in his own words, pretty boring stuff, and urged his supporters to move on. The Justice Department, under the leadership of Pam Bondi, insists that there is no so-called client list and that all credible information has been or will be released. Yet, even Trump's closest allies, including his own daughter-in-law Lara Trump, an influential television host in her own right, have broken ranks, openly demanding greater transparency and accountability. The fallout has been swift, fierce, and dramatic. Outrage has erupted across the social media platforms most frequented by Trump's loyalists. Prominent voices in the Make America Great Again movement have accused the administration of protecting the elite, echoing long-standing suspicions of a deep state conspiracy. House Speaker Mike Johnson, one of Trump's most trusted allies in Congress, declared on a widely viewed internet show, "We should put everything out there and let the people decide." Far-right influencers have taken things further, warning of imminent resignations at the highest levels and predicting a political rupture that could tear the movement apart. This is not just an online spectacle. Reports indicate that the controversy has opened a serious rift within senior ranks of the administration. Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino is reportedly considering resignation over the issue, highlighting the depth of internal divisions now threatening to destabilize Trump's inner circle. The Justice Department faces mounting criticism, with some activists and lawmakers calling for Pam Bondi to publicly clarify her contradictory statements regarding the existence of a client list. Bondi had previously told a major news network in February that she had such a list on her desk for review, only to reverse her statement days later, further muddying the waters and fueling suspicions. Meanwhile, anticipation is building for a major new documentary set to premiere on a leading streaming platform in August of 2025. Promising fresh revelations about Epstein's connections, the documentary has already generated intense speculation. Will it expose new names, reveal new evidence, or reignite public demands for accountability on a scale not seen since the original case broke? Legal experts are divided. Alan Dershowitz, himself a figure whose name has surfaced in various contexts surrounding the case, cautions, "The public has a right to know the truth, but the release of unverified information could be damaging to innocent people." On the other hand, advocates for survivors, such as attorney Lisa Bloom, argue with equal force. Victims deserve to see justice served, and that includes holding all enablers of Epstein's abuse accountable. The stakes, in this moment, could not be higher. Will the drive for transparency finally pierce the wall of secrecy and force open the vault of hidden truths? Or will efforts to pacify the public only deepen mistrust, harden divisions, and fuel even more fantastical conspiracy theories? And if those long-buried secrets implicate the highest levels of government, business, and entertainment, what then? The answers to these questions may well determine not just the fate of a single presidency, but the very future of public trust in American institutions. Let's consider what might happen if, under mounting pressure, the Justice Department decides to fully release the Epstein files. One possible scenario: new names emerge, not just any names, but those of prominent politicians, titans of finance, celebrated entertainers, and even foreign dignitaries, linked by credible evidence to Epstein's criminal activities. Such a revelation could unleash a tidal wave of criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and a reckoning unlike anything seen in modern American history. Public trust, already eroded to its lowest levels in decades, could collapse even further as citizens come to grips with just how deep the rot extends. But there are equally serious risks in the opposite direction. What if the files contain incomplete or unsubstantiated information? The consequences could be devastating. Alan Dershowitz underscores this danger. The risk is real. One wrong name, and a life could be ruined forever. History offers countless cautionary tales, from the McCarthy era to the more recent #MeToo movement, where mere accusations, regardless of their truth, have led to social exile, professional destruction, and lasting psychological harm. Legal commentator Jeffrey Epstein notes, "The legal complexities here are significant. We simply do not know what new information the files might contain, given ongoing investigations. There is a serious danger that hasty disclosure could undermine due process and the presumption of innocence." Of course, there is also the possibility that the files, once released, reveal nothing truly explosive. If so, this could paradoxically deepen the sense of conspiracy among both Trump's supporters and his critics. Already, far-right voices have vowed to reject any outcome short of complete and unredacted transparency. If the files turn out to be anticlimactic or are heavily censored, expect a storm of speculation, memes, and accusations to engulf social media for months, if not years. The belief that the system is fundamentally rigged would only harden, making future attempts at reform even more difficult. On the other hand, a careful, comprehensive, and transparent release could, at least in theory, set a new benchmark for justice in cases involving the powerful. It could signal that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, no individual is truly above the law. Emily Bazelon, a leading journalist and advocate for legal reform, argues, "The Epstein saga highlights the urgent need for comprehensive reforms in how sex crimes are investigated and prosecuted, including addressing power dynamics and institutional failures." Yet amid all the political maneuvering and media spectacle, it is crucial not to lose sight of the survivors, the real people, whose lives were irreparably changed by Epstein's crimes. Advocates like Lisa Bloom and feminist icon Gloria Steinem remind us that behind every headline, every leaked document, are individuals, many of them minors at the time, who suffered unimaginable abuse. As Lisa Bloom has said, victims deserve to see justice served, and that includes holding all enablers of Epstein's abuse accountable. Bradley Edwards, another attorney representing dozens of survivors, stresses, "The focus should remain on supporting the survivors and ensuring they receive the compensation they are entitled to. However, the release of sensitive files, if not handled with care, could re-traumatize these individuals or expose them to harassment and renewed scrutiny." Privacy attorney Carrie Goldberg insists, "Releasing the files is a necessary step, but it must be done responsibly and with consideration for the victim's privacy. The risk here is not abstract." In recent years, similar high-profile cases have seen survivors targeted online, doxxed, and subjected to renewed psychological harm by a voracious and sometimes cruel media ecosystem. Meanwhile, scrutiny continues to intensify on the institutions that enabled Epstein's decades-long reign of abuse. Take Harvard University, for example. The school now faces protests from students, alumni, and faculty, all demanding a thorough accounting of the nature and extent of its financial ties to Epstein. Internal audits have been launched, and the university has faced calls for a complete overhaul of its donor vetting procedures. Other organizations, including major financial firms and philanthropic foundations, are also conducting their own investigations, fearing lasting reputational damage if their links to Epstein come to light. The political consequences of the Epstein scandal extend far beyond the fate of any single party or politician. Recent public opinion polls show that a decisive majority of Americans, across the political spectrum, believe that not all of those involved in Epstein's crimes have been brought to justice. This overwhelming perception has helped fuel rare bipartisan calls in Congress for greater oversight of both the Justice Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Multiple senators, from both Republican and Democratic parties, have demanded regular briefings on the ongoing investigation, and some have introduced legislation aimed at increasing transparency in all cases involving high-profile defendants. On the international stage, the United Nations has amplified its calls for increased global cooperation in the fight against sex trafficking. Epstein's network, which spanned multiple countries and included private islands, luxury jets, and properties across North America and Europe, has underscored the urgent need for a coordinated international response. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has already launched new investigations into potential international money laundering and trafficking operations tied to Epstein's associates, many of whom remain unindicted and at large. Looking ahead, the Department of Justice has announced an internal review, scheduled for early 2026, to thoroughly investigate potential misconduct by officials involved in the original handling of the Epstein case. This sweeping review is expected to scrutinize the controversial plea deal negotiated in 2008, as well as the actions of prosecutors, law enforcement agents, and political figures who may have shielded Epstein or his associates from accountability. Legal experts believe that the outcome of this internal review could set a lasting precedent for how high-profile scandals are handled in the future, potentially catalyzing reforms that extend well beyond the Epstein case itself. All eyes are now turning to the upcoming documentary, set for release in August of 2025. Producers have hinted at interviews with previously silent witnesses, the unveiling of documents never before seen by the public, and the possibility of explosive new revelations. If history is any guide, the documentary will reignite global interest, intensify public demands for answers, and put renewed pressure on political and legal institutions to act decisively. Social media campaigns, online petitions, and grassroots organizing are expected to surge as the premiere draws closer, reflecting the depth and urgency of public engagement on this issue. It is also important to look at historical parallels. Consider the Watergate scandal of the 1970s, which similarly exposed the depths of institutional corruption and led to widespread reforms, or the Catholic Church abuse scandals, which revealed how powerful organizations can cover up systemic wrongdoing for decades. The Epstein case sits at the intersection of these historical lessons, reminding us that sunlight is often the best disinfectant, but also that transparency, if handled recklessly, can bring unintended consequences. For all the attention paid to the rich and powerful, the broader lesson of the Epstein affair is about the dangers of unchecked power and the necessity of institutional accountability. As citizens, our role cannot be passive. We must demand evidence-based transparency, insist on due process, and support reforms that protect the most vulnerable among us. Gloria Steinem observes, The Epstein case is a stark reminder of the power imbalances that allow sexual abuse to thrive and the importance of systemic change. If the story of Jeffrey Epstein teaches us anything, it is that justice cannot thrive in darkness, but neither can it survive in a mob-driven rush to judgment. The challenge is to find a delicate balance, one that exposes wrongdoing, protects the innocent, and honors the rights of all involved. This challenge becomes more urgent with each new revelation, each survivor's testimony, and each whisper of a new name in the corridors of power. So what does all of this mean for you, the viewer? The Epstein scandal is not simply a tabloid curiosity or a political sideshow. It stands as a defining test of how societies confront elite criminality, how they safeguard the vulnerable, and how they reckon with uncomfortable truths. The decisions made in the coming months by politicians, prosecutors, journalists, and everyday citizens will echo for years, perhaps even generations. They will determine whether this moment leads to lasting reform or devolves into yet another cycle of outrage and inaction. As the pressure for full disclosure mounts, remember what is at stake: the reputations and livelihoods of innocent people, the rights and dignity of survivors, the legitimacy of public institutions, and ultimately, the health and future of American democracy. The final chapter of this saga may still be years away. The new documentary, set for August of 2025, will almost certainly trigger another wave of scrutiny, media coverage, and public debate. And the Department of Justice's internal review in early 2026 looms on the horizon, carrying the potential to set new standards for how such cases are investigated and resolved. Despite over $500 million paid out to victims and years of painstaking investigations, the majority of Americans still believe that many of those involved in Epstein's crimes have not faced justice. The demand for answers is not receding. If anything, it grows louder, more insistent, and more urgent with every passing day. So does greater transparency truly open the door to long-hidden truths, or does it deepen divisions and fuel suspicion and conspiracy? In reality, it does both. Full disclosure can illuminate hidden crimes, but it can also lay bare the fault lines that run through society, about class, privilege, accountability, and the rule of law. Only by confronting these uncomfortable truths together, with courage, empathy, and a commitment to justice, can meaningful change take root. If you found this investigation enlightening, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share your perspective in the comments below. What do you believe should happen next in the Epstein case? Is total transparency possible, or is the full truth forever out of reach? Let us know your thoughts, and stay with us for more deep dives